Hey everyone, Dr. Kuniak here with a brief video lecture for you all. I wanted to try to get you something before the holiday weekend. Um, I apologize for not thinking ahead and shifting the schedule in such a way that the biopsychosocial assignment and mini mental status exam could have been um, giving you some extra time on that. If folks turned it in already and want to kind of rehash it, don't feel like you can't do anything with it because I've offered this extension, and if you're done with it, turn it in. You don't have to wait either, or belabor the points. But yeah. So anyway, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is we've talked a lot about assessment and the benefits of assessment, and what you can learn from assessment, and all that sort of stuff. The other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on, and hopefully we can then have a conversation about this maybe in the our next live meeting, and we don't have many live meetings left. I'd have to look at the schedule, but we only have maybe one or two more at this point in the semester. One of the things that I want to talk about is what you can't gain from formal assessments. So I'll tell you that we put a lot of weight on objective measures of assessment, but there is one really excellent subjective measure of assessment that you do need to pay attention to, and that is your skills as an observer, as a counselor. If you hear something that doesn't seem to quite make sense, pay attention to it. If your client says that they're not struggling with any depression, but something keys in the pit of your stomach and you're not sure you believe them on that, don't ignore your senses. There are informal assessments that we do all the time when we're with someone that we need to pay attention to. So remember those sort of things too. Um, I'm going to give a really sort of geeky example here, and I want you to kind of follow me on this. So in Star Wars, there's a scene in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Not the greatest title of all of the Star Wars movies, in my opinion, where Obi-Wan Kenobi is trying to find a particular planet, and it's not appearing on any of the star maps that they have. And so he goes to Master Yoda, who's training a group of young Jedi, and Obi-Wan explains that there should be a planet in this system that he's looking at, and he brings up this star chart, and he says it's clear that all of these other orbits from all of these other planets seem to focus around the fact that there would be another planet here in this section, but it's not on the map. And so it doesn't make sense because he can't find this planet that he's looking for. And so Yoda asks all the young Jedi what they think. Why would there should be a planet in this system, but there's not. And there is evidence that a planet could be there, but it does not appear on any of the maps. And why is that? And so one of the young Jedi says, because someone deleted it from the archives. And so Yoda's suggestion is to listen to what the young Jedi is saying. Don't focus on the facts in this case or what the star map is telling you. Focus on what your senses are showing you. Go to where you think there should be a planet on the map and see if it's there. And it is, because someone did delete it from the star charts. So in this case, I'm telling you that some of our informal assessments are really important. They may not tell us exactly what we need to see, but they are going to tell us something. And so we need to pay attention to that. Let me give you an example of how this might show up in your practice. So, for example, one of my former professors, I've mentioned him a bunch of times, Dr. Bernstein, used to do a lot of assessments for various companies in the city of Pittsburgh. He used to share with us all sorts of stories about the things that he gained from his work with these companies. And actually, one of the groups that he assessed for was the police force, the city of Pittsburgh Police Department. But I don't know if it was the police department in this case, but it was definitely one of the firms in Pittsburgh that he was taking a look at. And so he used a range of different assessment tools, many of which we've talked about in some form or another throughout this class this semester. Anxiety inventories, depression inventories, personality tests, mini mental status exams, full mental status exams, biopsychosocials, all those sort of things he would use. And then he would lay all of that out on his desk, he said, and kind of like look across all of these different assessment tools and see if he could note themes before he wrote up a narrative assessment of the individual who came in for their assessment, for their pre-employment assessment, and submitted that for consideration. He also used a few subjective tests. And so subjective tests would be things like the Rorschach, for example, is a subjective assessment because not everybody sees the same things. With the Rorschach, there are things that you're supposed to be able to see, or things that are seen that sort of correlate with certain characteristics. Supposedly, originally, you weren't supposed to look at all of the Rorschach ink blots because if they need it done on you, there should be an ink blot that you haven't looked at that you can look at fresh. Was what I was always taught. I'm not trained to use the ink blots, but I think that they're kind of fascinating. Anyway, there are other subjective tests just like that. And one of the tests that Dr. Bernstein introduced us all to is called the house tree person test. And what you do there is there's actually two types of this assessment. There's the standard house tree person, and then there's what's called a kinetic house tree person. And I have that book somewhere on my shelf, Kinetic House Tree Person. I just thought it was fascinating, again, when Dr. Bernstein introduced it to us. So what you have the person do is draw a house, a tree, and a person. You don't give them any other explanation than that. Just, draw me a picture of a house, a picture of a tree, and a picture of a person. The kinetic version would have all three of those in the same picture. You would draw a house, tree, and a person all on the same sheet of paper. The other would allow the person to draw a house, a tree, and a person on separate sheets of paper. And there's actually a science to it for where certain things show up. Like, so if the person draws shoes on their person, for example, that means something. If the person draws roots to their tree, that means something. I'll give you an example of one. If someone draws like a knot on the tree, or like a black space or something like that, some sort of marking or whatever the case may be, think of the tree as being the person's overall life cycle. The roots mean grounding and that they had a stable early development. The branches and the leaves and all of that are kind of more what's going on right now. And so wherever the knot falls along the tree tells you something that happened to the person developmentally. That like a trauma or some sort of significant negative event or something like that, you can kind of assess it based on where along the tree that the knot falls. For example, if they draw fruit on the tree means something. The house, same thing. Do they draw a door on the house? Do they draw a chimney? Is there smoke coming out of the chimney? It's fascinating, but I have not studied it enough to be able to like tell you everything about it. I've just studied it enough to kind of make sense of it, and as part of one of my assessment classes, we were allowed to pick a subjective test, and so I did use it. I've used it a couple of times just to kind of see if anything cues up for me something that's unique or whatever the case may be. So, for example, I did it on a friend of mine, and my friend drew a very standard tree, a very standard house. But when he drew the person, he actually drew me sitting across from him. So he drew kind of what you see here, like just my upper body, my face. It was really a really great drawing. I have it filed away somewhere here. But it was me as the person. And so I had some suspicions, but I didn't know what to make of that. So I took it into Dr. Bernstein and I said, what would you say about a person who, when they were instructed to draw the person, drew the counselor, the person who was sitting across from them? And he asked me what I thought, and I thought it really speaks to the fact that he didn't have an original idea for himself of what a person would look like. He just shadowed me. And Dr. Bernstein said, yeah, that actually fit for him. He said, I'm wondering if your friend is a person who tends to mimic other people, or maybe doesn't have the self-confidence enough to be the leader of a group of people and is more of a follower because he copied the primary subject in the room for him. And that's actually an interesting assessment. There was a time in college where I can remember all of my friends, myself included, started to grow facial hair. That was just something that I don't know, it was the thing at the time, and I've retained mine. But um, we just kind of all did. Many of us did. I don't. There was no formal discussion about it. It wasn't something that we all decided to do at the same time. This this particular friend of mine can't really grow facial hair. It's not something that runs in his family, but he really tried. So it wouldn't have been something that came natural to him, but he decided to try to do it, and he tried so hard to just be like the rest of us. So I think Dr. Bernstein was on to something. So anyway, another example of the subjective of a subjective test like that, Dr. Bernstein was talking about. He would have, like I said, he laid all of the assessments out. And so one of the assessments that he laid out was the pictures of a house, a tree, and a person that he had the individual draw too. And so he would kind of check across things. So like the biopsychosocial says that there was a trauma at this time in life. Okay, yeah, that kind of lines up with the tree. Yeah, it makes sense with this other assessment that he did, the MMPI, maybe Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, whatever. And then because he had 2 or 3 different things that kind of cross correlated with each other, he could feel pretty confident about writing that into the assessment. So he finished up the assessment. He wrote it all. He submitted it for pre-employment hiring. Recommended the person, shared a number of the personality characteristics that went on with the person, submitted it for their consideration. Then he would keep those files, he said. He would kind of like, stack them all back up together and keep them in a file for a year or 2 years or something like that, just in case someone asked him about something or needed something from him. It didn't happen a lot, and then eventually he would dispose of them, he would shred them. Well, in this particular case, the company called him back up, and the director was fuming because his assessment of the person was that they would be a really great fit, that they were very motivated, that they were very calm and put together and whatever. And the person was there for like a week and started a fight in the office and was just really aggressive and really, really confrontational and violent even. And so they had to fire him. And so they wanted to know, like, what did you miss? Because this really stood out. And Dr. Bernstein would guarantee his results to a certain level. And so he apologized for it, whatever, moved on. He said he picked up back up the file and opened it all up and like went through every individual item to kind of see what he could have missed because he checked everything. And he said he realized that he must have covered up a portion of the house tree person because the picture of the person was carrying an axe, so that must have been under something else, just that part of the image, and that would be a pretty big sign of some aggressive tendencies that would have stood out to him. So just my whole discussion here is assessments will only pick up the stuff that someone is willing to share, and so some assessments will employ I can't think of what they're specifically called, but they're factors that are in place where they basically ask the same question different ways to assess whether or not a person is trying to beat or cheat the test. That's not always the case, but some will do that. And so you have to recognize that a person may know what the assessment is trying to get, and so as a result, will try to beat it. And they may be good at it, and the assessment may not pick that up. So you do have to consider. I remember, I think I've shared this with you, the TV show House, about the doctor, I think Gregory House, who was addicted to pain medication but also was a brilliant diagnostician. On House, he used to say that everybody lies, and so you couldn't trust what they were telling you about their medical history. You had to, you had to dig deeper into people's lives to figure out what is really happening because everybody lies. And I don't know if everybody lies, and I don't know if they lie in every instance, but some people will lie. And so you have to trust these other informal assessments to help to sort of make sense of whether or not the assessments that you're using are giving you exactly what you need. So don't ever, I know we've talked about this before too, don't ever put all of your weight on one tool, because it may miss. That person may be trying to deceive you. They may have a really good reason to do so. Or it might just be a bad day and it doesn't quite catch what you need it to. But listen to your other, your other senses that are telling you what's going on. All right, I think I've talked enough. Hope this was helpful. Look forward to talking with you all soon. Let me know if you have any other questions. Again, with the biopsychosocial and mini mental status exam, use the mini mental status exam if you haven't already. Use the short form. Use the biopsychosocial assessment that's in the class resources. If you have your own and you want to use it, that's fine, but don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. You are not submitting the results of those assessments to me. You are not submitting a video. You're going to write that all up in a narrative form, short narrative form, and then reflect on the experience and what else you might need to use to really get a feel for the client and to render a diagnosis if this were real. If you have any specific questions, let me know. I hope you have a nice holiday weekend here, and I will, if you celebrate, and I will look forward to talking with you all soon. Take care then.